My husband would put something in his mouth and spend a full hour with me before leaving the house. One day, I saw that very thing in his pocket, and what I discovered utterly shocked me. All women who wish to make their husbands strong should definitely hear this story. Also, please tell us in the comments how you found our previous video. Just write, yes. My marriage was arranged in a family none of us really knew. The proposal came through someone my father knew, and after the necessary inquiries, my parents married me off. At first, I had no problems in my in-laws' home. I was quite happy. There were only 3 people in the house. Me, my husband, and my father-in-law. But after a few days I started getting an odd feeling, especially because of something my husband did that caught my attention. It made me suspect that something wasn't right. He had a strange habit. At a particular time he would come to me, holding something in his hand, and upon entering the room, he would pop it into his mouth. He would stay with me for an hour and then leave. By the time he came back, that thing would have disappeared. Seeing this baffled me because I couldn't figure out what it was or why he would put it in his mouth right before spending time with me. His behavior really started to bother me. I had a strong feeling that something was amiss. Otherwise, my husband was a good person. He took care of me and I was genuinely happy. But since I'd noticed this habit, whenever I tried to talk to him about it, his mood would turn cold. If I pressed the matter, he would get angry, which made me shrink back. I stopped bringing it up, worried that my husband might do something rash if he got too angry. In the meantime, I kept feeling scared about his strange actions, worried that my happiness might prove temporary. I had only been in this house for a short time and didn't truly know my husband or father-in-law yet. Under such circumstances, my anxiety was understandable, and that odd habit kept adding to my worries. My father-in-law also behaved strangely. I always found him quiet and distant. He wouldn't interfere in my affairs, nor did he talk to me much. Most of the time, he stayed shut up in his room. Then I noticed something else that made me even more suspicious and curious. Whenever I was busy around the house, my father-in-law would call my husband over, and they would have some sort of conversation. But if I went near them, they would immediately go silent. Their sudden silence whenever I appeared made me uneasy, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything about it. I never discovered exactly what my father-in-law would say to my husband, but I sensed that whatever it was must have been about me, or that strange item my husband kept in his hand. I was certain my father-in-law was the one giving it to him. My restlessness and anxiety grew. Initially, I tried to ignore my husband's actions because they weren't doing me any direct harm. They didn't affect my honor or happiness in a tangible way. But as time passed, I felt more and more uneasy. Why was my husband doing this? And what exactly was that thing? I asked my husband many times, but he stayed silent every time. Once, he snapped at me so harshly that I couldn't bear to bring it up again. I wanted to get to the bottom of this mystery, but all my attempts failed, leaving me increasingly anxious. The thought of potentially discovering a devastating truth gnawed at me. I had been basking in the happiness of having a caring husband and a peaceful in-law situation. No meddling mother-in-law, no troublesome sisters-in-law. Yet now, my husband's peculiar behavior and my father-in-law's cryptic demeanor were starting to terrify me. I had no one to confide in or seek guidance from about this unsettling pattern. What was going on between them? What was the nature of that mysterious object my husband carried? Why did he spend a full hour with me each time, at a specific time of day, only to leave soon after? None of it made sense to me. As time passed, my feelings for this home soured. I became disenchanted, and even my husband's care and affection began to feel hollow. I couldn't shake the sense that it was all a facade and that everything would eventually unravel, leaving me broken. This wasn't a trivial issue. If it had occurred once or twice, it might not have been so alarming. But this was happening every single day, and enduring the same suspicious behavior repeatedly was pushing me into a state of constant worry. Worse, I felt I couldn't even ask about it outright. I knew that raising these questions would only create more tension. One day, however, I found a pretext to broach the subject with my father-in-law. I casually mentioned how my husband would come to me at a particular time each day, spend exactly an hour with me, and keep something in his mouth the entire time. I thought perhaps he might react in a way that would give me a clue or a confession. But instead, my father-in-law's demeanor changed abruptly. His gentle, friendly expression turned into one of anger, and he firmly rebuked me. He said, "You don't need to question your husband's actions. If he hasn't told you, he must have his reasons. You should understand him and trust him, not pry into his matters. If there's something else, if he's not respecting you or not meeting your needs, then come to me and I'll take him to task. But do not bring this up again and don't mention it to anyone else. You'll only create problems for yourself." His harsh response left me speechless. It confirmed my suspicion that there was indeed something they were hiding. My father-in-law, who usually seemed so composed, was now stern and cold, making it clear that this matter was off limits. That evening, my husband came into our room visibly angry. He scolded me fiercely, warning me never to raise such issues with his father again. I was caught between fear, confusion, and the strong conviction that I had to find out what they were hiding. But at that moment, I knew I had to tread carefully. When I saw my husband so enraged, I became frightened and decided it would be best not to discuss the matter with him any further. I realized that continuing this conversation could jeopardize my married life. For that reason, I chose to remain silent and resolved not to create more problems for myself by arguing with my husband or father-in-law again. Yet, letting go of this mystery wasn't easy for me. I made up my mind to discover the truth on my own. To calm my husband down, I apologized and promised not to bring up the issue again. I assured him I would live the way he wanted. To reinforce this, I busied myself with household chores, giving the impression that I had genuinely let go of my concerns. My father-in-law and husband seemed to relax, thinking I had changed my ways and would no longer interfere. But inside, I was still determined to uncover the truth, even though I hadn't succeeded so far. One day I finally got a chance. When my husband returned from work, carrying that same mysterious item, he received an urgent call from his office. Apparently, something critical had come up, and he needed to go back immediately. In his hurry, he absent-mindedly placed that object in the pocket of his coat, which he left behind as he rushed out. Once he was gone, I seized the opportunity to check his coat pocket. When I found and saw the item, I was stunned beyond words. Let's step back to my own family background. My father, a college professor, was financially comfortable at first. However, with the successive birth of 7 daughters, his expenses increased significantly. Despite the growing strain, he never expressed disappointment about not having a son. While many other fathers might have lamented such circumstances, my father treated us with love and affection, never letting on that he might have preferred a son. My mother, too, devoted herself to raising and nurturing us with care, never allowing us to feel lesser because we were daughters. Their love and encouragement made us confident young women, but as we reached marriageable age, we began to understand the weight our parents carried. My father's shoulders began to slump under the financial burden. Despite their deep love and effort, the challenge of raising 7 daughters was undeniable, and they had endured numerous hardships for our sake. Now, as we reached the age to marry, my parents faced a daunting reality. There were no proposals coming our way. In the community we lived in, families sought alliances only with households that could offer substantial dowries and displayed a solid financial standing. Our family, unfortunately, could provide neither. My father's earnings were modest, and after his retirement, the household relied solely on his pension. Without wealthy parents or brothers to inherit the family's responsibilities, we daughters were often overlooked. Relatives and acquaintances avoided us, perceiving our family as having nothing to offer other than daughters. This lack of proposals wasn't something my parents were unaware of. They fully understood that the people in our social circle, family members and acquaintances, were unlikely to consider us. The reality was harsh but undeniable. They knew that the prospects for their daughters were slim in a society that valued material wealth and male offspring over love and personal qualities. It left my parents with a sense of helplessness, even as they continued to cherish and support us with all their might. Because they had lost hope in their family's willingness to help, my parents began seeking matches outside of our relatives. I was the eldest daughter in our family, already 26 years old, yet no proposals had come my way. This deeply troubled me, not because I was eager to marry, but because I could see the anxiety it caused my parents. I longed for my sisters and I to marry quickly so that our parents' burden could lighten. Yet this cruel society never considers someone's struggles. Nobody cared about our good manners, sensible natures, or education. Instead, everyone fixated on the lack of a dowry, believing that if they accepted a match with us, they would gain nothing material in return. We, however, placed no hope in people's opinions and looked only to Allah. We believed that when He willed it, our fortunes would change, perhaps even without us realizing it. I, however, hoped those doors of fortune would open sooner rather than later so that my parents might find some relief from their worries. Then our prayers were answered. A promising match came for me, brought to my father's attention by someone he knew. The family consisted only of a father and son, and the groom-to-be was financially secure. They were not interested in dowries or money. They simply wanted a well-mannered, capable girl who could manage their household. This proposal felt like a blessing. My family was overjoyed, and seeing my parents happy made me feel at peace. I thanked Allah for His mercy. After careful consideration, my father gave his consent, and I was soon married into this unfamiliar family. I was initially nervous, but after marriage, the love and respect shown by my husband quickly eased my fears. I began to feel genuinely happy and proud of my good fortune. Not only that, but my husband and father-in-law also started helping my father find suitable matches for my younger sisters. They wholeheartedly supported my father's efforts. It filled me with gratitude to have such considerate, respectful in-laws. My life felt like it was filled with happiness. However, there was one unsettling issue that nagged at me. I noticed that at a specific time each day, my husband would spend an hour with me, holding something in his hand. He would place it in his mouth before entering my room, stay with me for an hour, and then leave. I couldn't understand what it was. It made me uneasy, and I desperately wanted to know what he was holding in his mouth and why it was only at that particular time. This behavior started to fill me with a growing sense of anxiety. When I finally mustered the courage to ask him, his response was harsh. He strictly forbade me from bringing it up again. When I tried asking my father-in-law, he reacted with even more anger, sternly warning me never to mention it again. I felt a sense of dread. Something about this secret was clearly significant, and I began to worry that my once joyful home might somehow be taken away from me. My husband's peculiar habit and my father-in-law's stern response frightened me deeply. When my husband angrily told me not to discuss it again, I grew afraid. I decided I needed to investigate discreetly so as not to jeopardize my marriage. I didn't want to cause more worry for my parents, who were finally finding relief after years of stress. Yet despite my efforts, I couldn't uncover the truth. It felt like the more I tried to figure it out, the further I was from understanding. Then, one day I got an unexpected opportunity. My husband came home from work and entered our room as usual, holding that mysterious item in his hand. Just then, he received an urgent call from his office. In his haste to leave, he carelessly placed the item in his coat pocket and rushed out. I realized this was my chance. After he left, I retrieved the object from his pocket and finally saw it. I was stunned by what it turned out to be. In his haste, my husband had placed that object, a tweeze, into his coat pocket. Once he left, I quickly retrieved it, shocked to find that it was a tweeze he had been keeping in his mouth during those times with me. But why? What significance did it hold? And what was the purpose of him coming to me daily with it? Without wasting any time, I took the tweeze and approached my father-in-law, demanding an explanation. "I've seen this," I said, and I deserve to know what's going on in this household. Why is my husband using this to wheeze? At first, my father-in-law's face turned pale. After a moment of silence, he began to explain. He shared that he used to be a man of intense anger. Small provocations would send him into fits of rage, during which he completely lost control of himself. This anger persisted even after he got married, though his wife was an incredibly kind and devout woman who always respected him and treated him well. Initially, he would apologize to her after his anger subsided, and she would forgive him, but over time his temper began to drive a wedge between them. She started to grow distant, weary of his constant outbursts. Instead of realizing his mistake and working to mend their relationship, his anger and jealousy only escalated. His irrational suspicion began to blind him. Despite having 2 children together, he started to believe that she was losing interest in him and seeking someone else's attention. Then one day he called home from work. When his wife didn't answer the phone, his mind immediately assumed the worst. Enraged and without thinking, he stormed home, accused her of infidelity, and humiliated her. The accusation was so devastating that his wife decided to leave. She took their infant daughter and went back to her parents, demanding a divorce. At that time, consumed by anger and mistrust, he complied without thinking. It was only when his anger subsided that the gravity of his actions became clear. He realized he had destroyed his own home and lost his devoted wife because of his unchecked rage and jealousy. Not only had he lost his wife, but he was also separated from his daughter, who his wife refused to let him raise. "A man as mistrustful as you," she had told him, "has no right to raise our daughter." However, she allowed their son to remain with him, saying, "He's just like you. Before he grows up and disrespects his mother and sister as you have, I'm relinquishing my rights to him." The loss weighed heavily on my father-in-law. He watched his son grow up without a mother's love and constantly blamed himself for the broken family. To this day, he had never seen his daughter's face again. This regret haunted him, and it seemed to tie into the strange practices he had since adopted. Practices now involving my husband and that mysterious Therese. I don't even know where my daughter is or how she is doing. Many times I tried to find my wife, just so I could meet my daughter and let my son meet his mother. But it's as if she disappeared, and to this day, I yearn to see my daughter again, while my son longs for his mother's presence. That's why, when I arranged my son's marriage, I was filled with fear. I worried that he might end up like me, destroying his own home out of anger. He too had inherited my temper. That's when I encountered a pious man who gave me a Therese and told me, "Give this to your son. Tell him to set aside a specific time each day. Hold this Therese in his mouth, and spend that hour with his wife. This will help keep his temper in check, and he won't lash out at her." That's why I stopped you from prying into the matter. I feared your husband might lose control and make a regrettable mistake. Now, I ask you to let this matter rest. Simply put the Therese back and pretend you don't know anything. It's enough that your husband treats you well. I want both of you to be happy, and I don't want you to experience the heartache that my wife and I endured. Hearing my father-in-law's words left me stunned. I had never imagined I'd learn such a story. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized how selfless and kind-hearted my father-in-law truly was. He was doing everything he could to protect our home and ensure our happiness. I thanked him and promised to follow his advice. I vowed never to let my husband know I had uncovered their secret. My father-in-law smiled, placed his hand on my head, and blessed me with a prayer for happiness. As I returned to my room, I silently resolved to serve my husband and father-in-law even more diligently. I decided to overlook their outbursts, knowing now that their intentions were for the greater good. For me, the love and peace I found in my home was more than enough.